Nice. There is a little bit of a worry today with this stream, though. A little bit. So, I don't know what's going on in this house, but the Wi-Fi seems to keep cutting out. Now, there's a way for me to hardline, but I need a wire hooked up, like, upstairs to get it to properly go through the wall down to here. I have a hub that I was going to hook up down here that was going to go to both computers so I could be 2-computer hardlined, and it would have been fine. But because we never really set that up, I'm on Wi-Fi. So, like, I got here today and I turned my computers on and it said I had no internet. My phone had no internet, so I had to unplug and replug the modem in. And it took a little longer than usual for the Wi-Fi to come back on. So, I don't know what that is. We're going to see if that maybe amounts to, like, some obnoxiousness down the road. I don't know. I gotta get a contingency plan in place. Until then. Yeah. That's not... What? Hang on. I think the camera's in a bad spot. Okay, there we go. I also need a new freaking cable. This cable, man, is so loose that if you tap it, yeah, goodbye to your video feed. Like, that's actually a little wild. But here we go. I'll try to keep an eye on the camera feed. Make sure it doesn't go out too much. So we've still got a bunch of people who need the brassing done. It's kind of where we need to be with this. I'm thinking we're actually gonna do... I actually have a whole plan, right, with the basing. I might not need to take things off to base them. I'm thinking I'm gonna do a flat fluorescent color, and then we're gonna tape the outer area of the base off, and we're gonna use that resin medium with pearlescent to make it look like a bright fluorescent sort of like world that they're just walking around in with like weird glowy chemicals and stuff. You know, just something a little different. Something you don't normally see. What's up, Volgak? Whoa. Slippery. I mean, if you go Legionary, you've already got the models. You don't even have to, like, put Legionary on that list. You can use your Death Guard as Legionary. You may need to buy, like, 1 or 2 other Death Guard models just to be like, oh, this is a slightly different one. This is meant for this. What the... And you can just kind of go from there. And then if you just want a whole other squad type, then you can kind of pick from there. Blooded are kind of fun. Kasrkin are interesting. They don't win as much as they honestly should. You would think dice control at that level would, like, win you so many games. But as far as anyone can tell, either people who are really good at the game aren't playing Kasrkin, or there's just something wrong with the ability to control dice. I don't know. It's awkward. It shouldn't be the way that it is, in my opinion. Dice control is one of the strongest concepts in my head. And the fact that I don't see Kasrkin at like top spots at tournaments all the time. It's either because people who are really good at the game have played them and been like, oh my god, this is too good, we shouldn't play these. It'll feel bad to our opponents. Or they've played them and realized that it's not good for some reason. Like, I don't know. They have all the tools that I would think would be ideal for Kill Team. They have a repositioning tool. They have just, like, all the main weapons you would want. Maybe it's their fragile nature. Yeah, okay. Sometimes groups just get in their own ways of what they want to happen. But, yeah, you can't do that. I do feel like 9 times out of 10, whenever I'm playing against my friends, we tend to talk out Melee, which is weird. I think it's more of like a learning experience because usually when I'm playing against one of my friends, it's one of the ones that's like new to the game. So it's kind of hard to describe the choices made in Melee. And no matter how hard I describe Melee to them, like, they keep hitting me with the same thing, right? It's usually they'll roll their dice and they'll be like, well, I'm going to push all of these. And I'm going to go, okay, so you're going to... It happens in sequence, which is something I've talked to them about. Like, we've already talked about how it's... You get to pick your first dice, and then I'll pick a dice after. That's how combat works. But they'll still hit me with the... All right, I'm gonna push all these dice. And it's like, okay, so you've said that. Like, I feel like at some point I'm gonna want to just like take advantage of that. Like, okay, you're gonna push all the dice, cool. So one goes through so far. I'm gonna do this to stop that one from going through. Then you try to push that one. So now I've taken 2 hits. I've gotten rid of your third. Now I have a bunch of dice left over, and I'm going to, you know, attack full on with them. And he's going to be like, well, how'd that happen? And I'm like, because I've described this to you a million times. You do it per dice. You don't do all dice all at once. And it's like, Jesus, man. I don't know. I don't know how often I have to tell you all this. How many times do I have to teach you this lesson, old man? Beep, 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 beep. I do have some I do have Felgor. I did a whole video on my Felgor. You can see them painted there, or I can show you them. I kind of lazy man to them. I have an approach to painting that I call lazy man, which is like 80% airbrush. I think I did the OSL airbrush approach. Oh no, I actually slap chopped these. That's right. I did an all over airbrush color, and then I slap chopped the reverse OSL on. I wanted to see how it looked compared to how I usually do it with the airbrush, because there's like a dirty nature to slap chop where it's not perfect, and that imperfection causes some visual interest. I'm gonna go grab them in a second. Let me just get this warp lock bronze on here. me some more black bronze. So yeah, my lazy man approach, I even lazy man to the base. I really shouldn't have lazy man to the base. That's actually on me. So I went all over with a fluorescent green, and then I just took a big dry brush. I actually have a really big... Where is it? I must have put it under some stuff. I bought a makeup brush, and I did 2 colors. I did a really dark blue, like an almost black blue that I had, and then I did Fenris gray, I want to say. And then I went over it with, I did a mix of Pro Acryl white and fluorescent orange. So any of the spots where I was like, it's a claw, it's a blade edge, it's the eyes, maybe it's an area for like war paint, or it's like a singular component that makes them stand out as a specific model type, we hit it with the orange. But yeah, this is OSL based on Slap Chop, which feels a little different than OSL based on airbrush. I have painted Kroot. I can show you that too. Actually, before I show you the Kroot, let me show you what airbrush OSL looks like versus Slap Chop. This is airbrush OSL. This was fully airbrush, right? I actually did the entire basing of it with an airbrush color. It's just all over magenta, pick an angle, hit it with an airbrush, paint up certain spots of it that need to be a different color, like the flesh tone on the head, stuff like that. But yeah, this was entirely airbrush for the OSL effect versus the Slap Chop one you just saw, which is a little more dirty. Kroot. Kroot was an interesting concept. Let me grab this guy. So, the way contrast paint works is it's semi-transparent, right? So an idea we had with our Kroot was how the Kroot could be painted with contrast paint, where the Kroot itself would have certain colors already on it that would push the contrast paint one way or another. So these were painted blue with a OSL top-down zenithal of pink. And then we hit them with contrast paint straight up. We did a little bit with layer paint, in particular with the red. The reds on the leather did get a little bit of peak coloring to try to keep it as like a specific red color. And then, of course, the weapons we did hit with specific colors. But like the flesh tone is basically... I had like a middling green contrast that I applied, and you can kind of see like the surface area has like pink highlight feel, but then when you get into the shadows it becomes more green but like on a darker blue scale. Which I feel like it was a cool idea. I think the way I'm approaching now though is that when I want to do this method, I paint the model almost entirely in like a flat color. Like I'll white prime it, I'll paint in like, let's say a mid blue or maybe like a mid red or something. And then I'll zenithal highlight it with white ink. That way when I contrast, it goes from whatever the contrast color is to a contrast color blend involving like a pre-existing shader, like a blue or something. I think it looks best on the dogs, honestly. Like, it actually looked really cool on the dog. Let me try to get you guys a bit of a zoom. See how the under part of its like leg goes to like a bluish green and then the top is like a reddish brown? That's all one contrast. Which I think makes flesh tone feel like flesh tone. Because if you know how to paint flesh tone, like in digital painting or physical painting, there's usually a lot of underpainting involving reds and blues before you then apply the glaze of like flesh tone over top of it. Because then the reds and blues pull the flesh tone to where it needs to be based on whether that area is hot or cold. Kind of like how you see like reds throughout and then like it's a little bit cooler in some areas. Same concept. Same concept, same result. But yeah, this is all based off of my first ever attempt at an airbrush style OSL model, which was my Abaddon that I did like forever ago. This was the first attempt at this. My buddy got me an Abaddon and I kind of wanted him to be like glowy green. Not the best, but this was probably the biggest learning experience for me. Because, like, you're looking at it from top down, it feels pretty normal. It's when you look at it dead on that you're like, oh, this is a little different. There's more I could have probably done to this to make it, like, stylistically better. But I keep it around because it's a reminder of, like, where I first thought I would be coming from and compared to where I am. You can do that. Just assume that the colors you're putting down are going to make contrast paints or glaze paints or whatever you apply over top of it. It's going to shift it one way or another. So this is where color theory comes in, because you have to think of the color you're going to use versus how it's going to mix. That way you kind of get it in your head that like, oh, well, blue plus this color is going to look a little purple. And if that's what you're aiming for, that's fine. It's actually why I think doing the zenithal white over top of your shadow color, goddamn, is probably the best way to go if you're glazing or contrasting, because then you'll have, whenever you pick a color, it will be that color. It'll be like, all right, this is orange, but then when it gets into the shadow, it'll turn a little purple. Like that kind of thing. Yeah, I have a loud as hell air compressor. There's a lot of interesting air compressors out right now. I've seen a few. There's one that sits on your table as like a small box. And you just press a button on it and it turns it on. And it runs perfectly fine. And it's just this tiny little air compressor box that you can just run. Meanwhile, I have like a full-blown double engine, just ridiculous looking airbrush. Which I love. It's pretty good. It's got the dual heat sinks for when you're using it a lot. Because an air compressor always running is a bit crazy. Let me mix this up a little bit. I got mine for cheap. I actually felt really lucky. I went to the local art store around the time I was thinking of picking back up Warhammer stuff. So I was looking into alternative products, right? Like you don't want to be stuck just painting with one product because maybe it's a little too expensive and it doesn't even give you the best results, right? And Citadel's kind of that way. Like, you know, Citadel's going to work. It's going to do what it does, but occasionally you'll come across paints within the Citadel line where you're like, God, this isn't even that good. Why would I want to use this ever? And then you're looking around because you got to find alternatives. I think people usually mock Citadel for their black paints. Their black paints usually feel a little too shiny, I think is normally what people say. They usually feel a little too shiny. Meanwhile, I now own Golden Super Flat, or Golden So Flat Matte Black. And it is such a good black paint. Dude, some of the airbrushes I've seen are super small. Like, it's a brush and like the air compressor is about like half the size of like an Army Painter paint box. And it's just, you plug it in directly to USB, and if you unplug it, it usually has a battery in it that lasts about 2 hours. Or you can just leave it plugged in. And they're smaller. There's smaller air compressors than that. My one buddy started because he wanted to check something out, and I think Squidmar or Ninjon, I think it was Ninjon, talked about like a compact air compressor. Very clearly, the video felt like an ad where someone offered to give him one to review. And he used it and probably thought it was actually pretty cool. He probably sat there and thought about it from the perspective of someone who doesn't have a lot of space or has never owned an airbrush and is always worried about the price of owning an airbrush. And he realized, like, oh, this is actually really good because it's not expensive. It takes up no space in your house because it's so tiny. It could fit in a drawer. It's a super low-cost way to get in because it hit like 30 or 40 PSI or something, which is what you want. You want to be in that range. And he was like, that's all you need. Yeah. He doesn't need to set up his whole big compressor system. He can just sit down, bust out the wireless. The only reason I have the big one is because I do have a little bit of space to use. And like I said, the local art store, it was on sale. It was just on sale. It was so cheap. As far as I could tell, they were trying to clear out their airbrush stock because nobody in this local area was interested in airbrushes. So, you know, take advantage where you can. I think everything was like 40% off, so for about 150 bucks, I got a serious two-stage air compressor. Basically, I have a switch on the side. I can either turn it to have constant pressure, where it fills up consistently and then lets the air out through the escape when you're not using it, or it fills it up to a point and then refills it if it ever gets too low on pressure. And then I bought two very cheap, very basic airbrushes. The main reason I was cool with that is I didn't want to spend $200 on like an Iwata or a Badger because I had never airbrushed anything before. So you always have that notion in your head of like, oh man, what if it clogs? Like, what if I clog it day 2 and it's not uncloggable? I just dumped $200 on something I'm going to lose the ability to use, and I'm going to want to use it. So dipping into a cheap airbrush at least teaches you, like, oh, I don't need to worry about this as much as I thought. God, what is going on with my hands? Which is like an ideal situation for me, is being like, all right, for $50, let me learn how an airbrush works. Now I know I could easily pick up a Badger. I would know how most of the parts work. I would know how to clean most of it if I ever needed to like deep clean or something. It's completely fine at this point. My buddy owns like an $100 Iwata, and I cleaned that for him, so I kind of know the difference between like a cheap one that you just get versus like a serious one. The Iwata has an interesting like cap system, whereas the one I have, you actually have to unscrew the tiny little triangle tip. The Iwata has a pipe that goes to a tip that you just, when you take the lid off, you just pop that off completely and you have full access to the neck. So you can clean the neck out super easy. So like there's a little bit of like a Cadillac feel to that kind of an airbrush, because it's even easier to clean than what I know how to do. And supposedly the Badger's kind of the same way. But now I'm finding out about other cool airbrushes, and it's making me want to like use those instead. There's an airbrush that's out there right now that's like an engineering masterpiece. The way it's designed, you never need to change the tip, right? Somehow he designed the tip to be like, you just change the needle to get the different sizes you need. The tip itself, it works for all of it. So if you go with a 0.3 needle, it fits the 0.3 needle perfectly. And then when you use it, it comes out as like a 0.3 feel. And then it's the same thing if you use like a 0.5 or something. It just feels right. All you gotta do is clean out the bowl, change the needle, and keep going. And I like that idea. So, depending on what you're trying to do with an airbrush, you can kind of get away with it with rattle can. Like if you rattle can primer, Games Workshop sells colored rattle can primer. You're gonna want to look into which ones are good, because sometimes people will be like, "Man, this flakes off super easy," and you don't want those. But if you get a good rattle can primer, what ends up happening is you get a rattle can white primer, potentially. Like either white or Wraithbone. People usually use Wraithbone from Games Workshop just because the white scar is weird. I've tried the Games Workshop white primer and it turns yellow on some of my models, which is very awkward. Which is why I think a lot of people use Wraithbone instead. Because Wraithbone seems to be pretty consistent with actually being the color you want. So what you can do is you pre-prime with the color you want for your shadow, and then you would zenithal prime very lightly with the white. You don't want to pack up the layers. You just want to get like a pretty easy top-down white using a primer rattle can. And then you can go ham with some contrast paint or some glaze. Achieve some really cool effects. I like the Iwatas I've used are good. I think I prefer the Badger because my friend's Iwata came with a .3 nozzle and he didn't get like a .5. They didn't give him one. And after using a .5 on my cheap one, I can't go back. You can't make me go back. Dude, .5 is so perfect for priming and getting quick effects done. The speed at which you were able to achieve things with a .5 is so good. Hell yeah, man. Space firefighters. I feel like I need to do something extra to this gun. It doesn't feel good. I might paint the entire front of this in silver. I don't think I painted the other components in silver like I was supposed to. Technically, we could OSL this as well. I never really OSL my plasma guns. I always just do the little glowy color and then I call it. But I could turn the airbrush on, get some white ink in it, hit it real quick in just the general area, and then hit it with pink. It would require, honestly, the tiniest amounts of paint. Like, I wouldn't want to do it in a crazy, overbearing way. Yeah, we're going to do this. And then I might actually have to go in and manually fix the areas on the front of this that have glow coming out of the vents. Ooh, I know. This guy's going to get a little more detail than you'd expect. I'm actually going to hit it with a physical silver. This is going to be a base color for it, and then I'm going to hit it with a physical silver. And then we're going to bust out Shyish Purple and Acerman Blue. We're going to water it down a little bit. And I'm going to do the sort of crispy metallic colors. I haven't done crispy metallic colors in forever. Sort of scorched overheated metal. We're going to set this guy aside because he's going to need a lot more detail work. And then we have 2 more guys for this brass color. I was thinking last night. Okay, I had a weird dream last night, but more on that later. I was thinking last night that we actually hit these guys with the Nihilic Oxide to make their brass look like it's oxidized brass. Give them a little bit of a feel of just like they've been doing this for a while kind of thing. But yeah, I had a super weird dream last night. I've been watching too much of this game. Like, I watched War Games Live. I was watching a lot of the games happen. I was thinking of some of my lists that I want to run. And I was thinking, like, oh, I got to get back into it. Because I haven't played in, like, a couple weeks now. I've been too busy with the move, too busy with just general projects, getting them done. You know, things I got to do. Perfectly fine. But out of nowhere, I just had this like awkward dream where I was at my local store. I finally was getting a game in with someone that I know from that store. And I was playing an army I've never played before for some reason. And I was just like, all right, let's get into it. And that was kind of like the moment in the dream where I realized I never even like looked at any of the information for the army I was playing at all. Like just 0% knowledge on the army. And then when I pulled out their data cards to like try to quickly ascertain what I'm about to do, the data cards made no sense. Like I know how a data card is supposed to read right now. You know, you understand the statings, basic. You see certain keywords and you're like, oh, I get it. I didn't understand a single thing I was looking at. Like, I was trying to play Tyranid in my dream. And I remember pulling the Lictor card out to realize, like, what I was supposed to be doing with my Lictors. And I just remember, like, the stats on the card were just very weird. There was, like, no strength stats on any of the attacks. There was a melee attack that was, like, attack numbers, 0 through 3, but no information on what that meant. So I was just looking around like, what is all this? Why is this the way it is? And I just didn't know what was going on. I had no clue. And the whole time I'm sitting there like looking at it, trying to figure it out, my opponent was looking more and more angry that I wasn't doing anything. It's a horrifying dream. I feel like the best thing to do with that terrain, I've seen high-end painting of the close quarters terrain, and it's really cool looking. But honestly, the more I think of my terrain and what I did with it, I just like OSL painted it and then did a couple details here and there. Like I painted the monitors on some of the walls. And that was about it. And I think that's honestly the way to do it. Like I OSL'd it and I hit it with shader. I did a 3-stage OSL and then I hit it with shader after the fact. And then all the doors that I had, I hit with the Flesh Terror Red speed paint. Because Flesh Terror Red just overrides whatever color's on there. Dude, Flesh Terror Red is crazy. If you haven't used Flesh Terror Red, it's like a dark, deep red color. And no matter what you've painted prior, it no longer will be that color. It's going to be Flesh Terror Red. Like, it's actually kind of crazy. What's up, Go For It? kind of saved the shield for last. Shield's going to be a bit nutty to work on. But yeah, I think Mountainside. I think they just did an OSL, like I think they OSL'd with the colors I use, or maybe colors similar, the fluorescent colors. They did like they did black. They did what looks like a teal or like a dark blue almost, and then they did some kind of like green fluorescent OSL on top of it. And just called it a day, which probably the best way to do it. Make it visually striking, and then just stop and just do other things. Because, oh my god, painting terrain sucks so much. Because you could spend days painting terrain. I think I spent like 2 weeks painting my Chalnoth. No, my Nachmund. The Nachmund terrain I got from the Kill Team box. Yeah, I spent 2 weeks painting it. It looks really good. I really like how it looks. I hate that I spent 2 weeks on it. Really should not have done that. I could have been doing so much more. What's up, Trom? Yep, Case, see you around. See you in the Discord. They've done 2v2. The 2v2 they did was not great though. Actually, it's the framework's there, but they also actually have 2v2 game modes. Technically, they have a 4-person free for all, but you can always augment it to just be 2v2, which is probably a better thing anyway. because it is very hard to play a map where the terrain is set up where you can't be shot at in your deployment zone right away. Because technically 2v2 is 2 kill team boards. And we tried this. There was a video we took that didn't at all work. Actually didn't look that good. Where we filled 2 boards with as much terrain as we had and tried to play a game. But even though we tried to play it, like, we tried to sort out kind of how we were going to play it, man, it was not good. Like, I think one of my friends, half of his team was dead by the end of turn 1. And he was playing a horde team, so he lost so much power. Everyone else that was on the field played a lot cagier, which meant, like, I couldn't attack them, so I didn't. And I don't know. It was not the best setup. But I have seen 2v2, and the way they did a 2v2 mission, they said, like, oh, the Space Hulk crashed into a planet, and now people are fighting in and around the Space Hulk. And the way that looks is that half the map was close quarters, the other half of the map was open terrain, and both players had to start. One player's team had to start on one side, the other player's team had to start on the other, but they could cross over. Like, you could go around the walls from the outside, you could shoot from the close quarters terrain into the regular terrain. It's just the terrain rules adjusted things. So, like, if your target was in the open terrain area, you wouldn't get the benefits of, like, lethal and all that. It was an interesting concept. I don't know if it was executed well or not. Like, it seemed okay, but I don't know if I'd run it that way personally. I'd probably make some adjustments to it. But there were some really cool things. Like, there's a Games Workshop White Dwarf magazine release that involved 2v2, I want to say, kill team in close quarters, and it involved specialty tiles that were considered elevators, like one-way elevators, which meant the 2 sides of the board had these spots. Had these spots where people could, like, move their character up a floor to go to, like, the other zone, or down a floor, and there was some kind of crossover with that allowed people to, like, fight between the 2 floors where the 2 different teams were fighting, which I thought was kind of cool. I feel like a lot of the time, though, it's free-for-all. Free-for-all tends to be the way to go, but it's a little harder to balance 2v2, especially around TAC Ops. I think they got rid of TAC Ops and then changed how victory points are earned to try to make it a little bit better. But the framework, the kill team framework, allows for a lot of cool stuff. I don't know how familiar you are with other Games Workshop properties, but they have things like Wrath and Glory, which is their D&D. And I always thought it would be really cool if you could translate some of the things that happen in Wrath and Glory into the Kill Team universe. That way your team could be like 4 characters, and the GM could create a map that involves enemies that have their own stats, and maybe your characters have, like, way more wounds or potentially put out way more damage, or things stack in certain ways that just make your statting really crazy, but then you apply, like, the Kill Team logic to it with conceal, cover, and all that, and you can actually physically play out the combat in Wrath and Glory within the confines of what would be Kill Team. And I thought that could be really cool. Grab some shining silver if I have it over here. No, yeah. Whenever you think of those situations, you got to find a group. Where the hell did my Talos bronze go? Oh, brazen copper. This might look cool. Finish up this servo skull. We're going to put the effort in on the gun. I think one of the last things we're going to do is the visors and like the fluorescent coloring on screens and stuff. Just get the copper on here. Switch over to my wet palette so we can kind of work a little bit with the silver. We're going to have to grab my Shyish purple and my Acerman blue as well. Because we are going to do Scorched Metallic on the end of this gun barrel. Actually, in thinking about what we're going to do for the base, I might have a more interesting idea. What if we painted the entire base top chrome? Like flat chrome, and then we hit that with the resinous liquid after we of course tape around the outside of this to try to keep it together. That way the chrome itself is like reflective, and then there's like a goo over top of it that distorts that reflection. I think that could be kind of cool. Try it out. Kill Team is a fun place to experiment with styles and methods of painting. It's because of how like limited the models are. You don't have to commit to it for like a 100 unit army. You can try stuff out. I selected jazz and funky for today's music options. Alright, while that dries, let me grab this Asserman. And then we need Shyish. Let's try Luxion. So the goal here is to water it down a bit. Kind of make it a light glaze. And to all you Salamanders players out there, this is something you might want to learn how to do. So with it really watered down, when you go over top of the silver, you still see it kind of through, right? Like you see the silver element. And the goal is sort of do like a straight ring in the one color. May have to correct some areas. I don't know why it came off up here. I'm gonna give it a second longer to dry. Because I need that metal to be completely dried out. Nihilic oxide. I've not used it in a while. There it is. I don't know if any of you have ever tried or attempted anything involving nihilic oxide. It is a fantastic oxidization effect color. Get a little on the brush, water it down a little bit. You just kind of apply it over the surface you want to look oxidized. You can wipe it away with your finger a little bit. Shaft. It just applies that little bit of teal. And as it dries, it just streaks, it goes into the corners. It is an insanely good technical paint if you want to do oxidized brass. Never underestimate this paint. should have one more squeeze bottle. I need to double check for it. Baseball Jazz. We still have to determine whether we want to do like the weird reflective yellow. I think I might want to. We'll mix it in the wet palette because it's going to be a blend of white, I think yellow, orange, fluorescent, and then like a little bit of pearlescent ink. And then we basically have to go around to every model and like touch up the yellow location with it to give it that like high vis, high reflection yellow. No Skaven yet. Skaven are cool, man. I love how they look. I love how they feel. I play Chaos. I will never play Skaven. I don't know. It's just, I feel like in another time, in another place, maybe I would have played Skaven if I wasn't so tied up with Tzeentch and eventually Slaanesh. But I've got one Skaven team for Underworlds, and I kind of like that. I kind of want to play them too, because the last Underworlds tournament that I did that actually involved people, the notion from one of the people there was like, oh, well, the Skaven suck. You can't even enhance them without needing... Like, you only get one card in your entire deck that can allow you to enhance a single Skaven. And when I was looking at it, after he said that, I was like, oh, it's not about you doing it. It's about your opponent doing it. Your opponent has to decide whether they think it's important for them to trigger your rat to become, like, full size. It's the whole point of it. It's a sort of like a catch-22 option. Like, can you kill it with it? If you don't kill it with it, it's going to level up. It's going to enhance itself. Are you cool with it enhancing itself? Like that kind of stuff, which I think is pretty cool. It adds a whole other layer. Granted, I personally prefer to continue playing Ephelims because that's what I've been playing this whole time, so I know the cards, I know what to expect, but at the same time, could be cool to play the Skaven. Someone sent you a deal? Oh, dude, eBay. Yeah, eBay usually takes a minute. That's cool. Underworlds is great, man. I bought the Mirrored City, or the Mirrored whatever, that 4-team box set that they came out with to update some of the teams. I had Ephelims, which is like, that's the team I really wanted to play. Because it sounded weird. And I do love weird. I prefer weird over straightforward. Combat Patrol is a good way to learn 40k, but it's also missing a bunch of elements. A lot of the teams aren't balanced yet in it. It's good for quick games of 40k, but yeah, you do really miss out on like a lot of the nuance of 40k in it. I feel like it's not always the best introduction to a team either. Like, the whole point was so that you could be like, oh man, maybe I'll like Blood Angels, so let me buy this Blood Angels Combat Patrol. And then if the Blood Angels Combat Patrol plays differently than what you would play Blood Angels as at like full skill or full tier size, then it just feels weird when you play it, and then you're just like, oh no, I don't want to play Blood Angels, even though that maybe, yeah, they are the team for you. It's just the Combat Patrol plays differently. It's definitely easier to learn if your group is like not into learning extremely deep, ridiculous games. Like Kill Team is way too deep for its own good. There's a lot going on in there, and maybe 3rd edition will iron some of that out and make it a little bit smoother to play. But like, yeah, Kill Team is a little bit ridiculous to be like, hey, let's casually dive in and learn this. No. There's nothing casual about learning Kill Team. You want to be good at Kill Team, it's going to be a bit. You're going to trip a lot. You're going to experience a lot of downside. And then maybe, just maybe, after a year of struggle, you'll be okay at the game. Meanwhile, Combat Patrol is so limited that it's not that bad. It's also not a good reference point for 40k, I think. It didn't achieve the goals that they thought they were going to do with it. But, like, on its own, it's okay. I just hate that my team hasn't been updated yet. Because my team is so imbalanced in, like, the bad direction that playing them in a tournament is basically being like, man, I can't wait to see what last place looks like. Because it's just near impossible for you to score points. I think Combat Patrol... Hang on. Oh my god, how did that happen? I think Combat Patrol will be good once almost every single team gets replaced. The question is whether or not the original teams remain, because there's problems there, right? I'm wondering if the original Chaos Space Marine Combat Patrol team still exists. Because the original Chaos Space Marine Combat Patrol is extremely powerful. Just is. It's a really, really powerful team. They just got their codex, which means they got an updated version, which drastically reins in a lot of that power. But if the original team still exists and I can still pick it up and play it, why would I play the new team if the old team was just better? Right? Like, Tau got the new team, I think, because of their codex. Basically, anytime a codex releases, you get a new team. There's also a couple White Dwarf teams, which, weirdly, the White Dwarf teams are for box sets that already existed as, like, new Combat Patrols. Like, they released a NIDS White Dwarf team. Why would you release a NIDS White Dwarf team when the new NIDS kill team, or the new NIDS Combat Patrol was already a thing? And then they did the same thing with Space Marines. They did an alternate Space Marine Combat Patrol, which is like, alright, you just made a new one. Why are you doing it again? There's so many boxes that are out right now that suck, that need new rules. You could have put a band-aid on those. But the trick is, if you get the rules down, right? Like, if you get the rules down for Combat Patrol, you could probably play around with somebody who's, like, you know, being relatively serious about the strategy they're doing in about 35 to 40 minutes. Which, oh my god, that's ideal. That's we just picked up food from the local store, and we want to eat burgers and play a game at the same time and not really worry about it kind of situation. Like, that's what you want. Like, the thought of me playing a 2K game at my friend's house is we were going to set up the table. We were going to get all the terrain on it. We were going to draw all the cards. We were going to set our characters up. And then throughout the weekend, we would kind of, like, go back, maybe play for about an hour, get, like, a whole phase done, write down what phase we're on, and then go back to, like, doing other stuff. Because it just, when you're being serious with 40k at 2k points, it's a lot. That's why time-limited tournaments are so rough for people who are kind of new. It's because you are not ready for being like, I'm limited to how long to make up my mind on certain strategies. Like, that's how you make mistakes. Dude, I could never play Apocalypse. I think the situation I would need to be okay playing Apocalypse is like you get to play one game over the course of a whole weekend at like an event, right? Like I don't want to have to be like, man, I got to get a game done in a day at like 10,000 points. I would hate that so much. No, dude. I guard at 2K is like that's got to be a skill, right? Like you have to learn the skill of playing guard at 2K points in a tournament. You have to learn the knowledge of how to speed up your dice rolls, of how to make better choices, because you're not just playing for points. You're playing to make sure you have enough time to do all the actions you need to take. Like, the more I think about Imperial Guard at an average tournament, the more I think about it as like a handicap, right? Like, you don't get to do everything you need to do. It's just not a thing. You have to be very discerning with what you're about to shoot, because it's not just like, oh, this might not work, or oh, this only will probably do like one wound. It's, oh, this is going to take 4 minutes off of my clock. I need to make sure those 4 minutes aren't needed later for me to move a unit and score. That is absolutely crazy. Because, dude, people talk all the time right now with like Puppy Jail with the Space Wolves just using their Worgen to hold people in place and being like, haha, you can't do anything. It's Puppy Jail. Imperial Guard jail of just needing to sit there as an Imperial Guard takes 50 minutes to do one shooting phase. There's a very active Imperial Guard player at our local store, so whenever I'm looking for games, he's 90% chance going to be the one to pick it up, and I'll play him, but when he says, oh, I'm down, I have it in my head like this is going to be a full day game. This is going to be we set up at opening and Craig's telling us to leave the store when we're done. Like get your stuff back up, I got to go home kind of situation. Like, that's what that is. It's a full friggin' day at that store. It is not, it's nothing to laugh at. It's nothing to think like, this won't be that bad. No, it is an until the store closes game, which is, that's cool. I don't mind those in that situation, but like in a tournament situation, the whole reason I'm planning on taking my chess clock to tournaments now is because if I get put against a guard player, I'm going to be like, yo, we're chess clocking. Because I'm not going to lie, I don't want you consuming the entire time of our game. Dude, I'd prefer it. I would honestly prefer Kill Team. And every single person at my local store has a Kill Team now. They've all been thinking of getting into it, so they all kind of pulled the trigger on it. And now there's like a tournament coming up for the store that's going to be Kill Team related when the new edition drops. And like, they're all ready. They're always talking. Like, I've been to that store for the AOS Spearhead stuff, and people have been standing there being like, yo, I kind of want to play a Kill Team next week. I'm like, Jesus Christ. It took you guys this long to catch up? been talking to people like, I don't know what team I want to play. And I'm like, well, name a few. I'll bring them. Like, the only teams I really don't have right now are the third season. I don't have a lot of the Beta Decima teams. I've got Scouts, and that's basically it. I was debating grabbing Jaegers as like its own thing. Problem is, I also don't even think I have like the right amount of Scouts. I need more knife wielding Scouts, since that's the highest DPS the Scouts can get. For when you need to fight elites, you need those freaking knives. Nice. My caster can look like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I tried to paint them. The way I decided to paint them was, I went, alright, I'm going to paint them the Kasrkin colors. But I'm going to be like, vibrancy to the max, right? So, all the pictures is just like, yeah, Kasrkin are green with a little bit of like beige. Like a little bit of like a yellow shifted beige. And I'm like, I got this. So I literally made them bright green, bright beige. I painted most of their helmets, I think, red, and then the leader's helmet is blue, signifying that he's the commander. And when I was done, I was like, yeah, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Okay. I could see Scouts looking better with chainswords, but I think there's a chainsword option that a lot of that some Scouts get. Like, I think the leader gets a chainsword option. But man, that knife, the increase in the damage they gave to that knife was super needed. But it definitely means you're going to have, like, suicide troopers. When you're fighting an elite army, like legionary or intercessors, you're going to have troops where you're like, that guy's going to die turn 2. But hopefully what he does will set me up for a turn 3 where I have a comeback. Yeah, I'm hoping some things are outlined a bit better. That's one of the big things we are really hoping for, is that certain elements of the game that are very up in the air are like lined up a bit better, specifically for timing. The amount, like, you guys can check my Phobos overview video for the amount of people who just comment on it with, that's not how ambush works. Ambush lets you do it right away. But every single time I'm like, okay, I'm going to point to you to all the places in the Q&A that explicitly point out when a unit is considered to be activated, which is after you have chosen its symbol. And since you have chosen its symbol, you can't choose a different symbol. But, like, people are still just like, nah, you don't have to use Gorilla to change to be able to ambush. Yes, you do. It is how they balanced that, because that is an insanely strong ability. Double Strike is super ridiculous. Almost every army in the entire game that has Double Strike, it's almost unnecessary. Because, like, Double Strike usually comes from, oh, your unit's wounded. Okay, well, I'm double striking for almost no reason against Horde teams, because my single strike will kill it. There's always, like, that level of how the game works. Gorilla Double Strike allowed me to kill, like, Tyranid warriors without taking damage. That's insane. So there had to be a limit to it. And they made it a limit by forcing Gorilla to work. But everyone's like, nah, you can do it at this time. And it's like, all right, here's the 3 or 5 places you can read to verify my information that you refuse to read because you would rather it be like this place where you can just do whatever the hell you want. Scouts seem simple. They seem like a good starter team. The trick is everyone says Intercessors is a good starter team just because the amount of wounds they have means you can make mistakes. Like, you can just make mistakes with them all day long. You'll survive. It takes a huge mistake to fail. And with the change to how there's like 3 objectives now and the focus is on being more killy, I feel like Intercessors are going to come back as a big team again. Because their whole thing is you needed to leave Intercessors behind to capture points. You don't need to do that anymore. I think Intercessors and Legionary come back in a big way. Kasrkin are incredible. I still, like I said at the beginning of the stream, do not understand how I don't see them winning tournaments as much. Like, if 40k and all these other game modes have proved anything, being able to control how your dice work is one of the strongest things you can do. And yet, for some reason, I don't see enough people winning as Kasrkin to, like, prove that point. It's either they're the exception to the rule, or the best players in the game decided they didn't want to play Kasrkin because they were too easy. And then just, like, left the Kasrkin for newer players to learn and, you know, have issues with and not quite fully understand how they're supposed to work. Like, I don't know how else that works. Like, they should be top tier, in my opinion. That's the thing, though. When Kasrkin came out, because of how low their wounds were specifically, and I think their ability to hit on 4s instead of 3s, everyone said you might as well just play Scions. Because more people were into the idea of, like, oh, well, being more consistent with your hits is a better option. But the reality just became, like, oh, you just Melta. You just use a Melta gun against an elite and hit it with, like, 30 damage, no problem. Between your rerolls and your dice controlling, you're 30 damage into an elite. Guess what? It's dead. And when you talk about multi-killing, if we're talking about horde teams, dude, what I did in that one Kasrkin game against my friend, where I threw the beacon down and had a warrior chuck a grenade and I wiped like 3 units, because I just got to basically use a lot of points for free. They have the ability to do crazy stuff. They really do. It's just, I guess, no one really gets into them like that. Alright, where's my... I'm pretty sure that's the metallic. I can't remember where I put the cloak. I'm just going to do a different cloak color. You don't really need turn 1 reposition. Turn 2 reposition is the best because you're going to mostly be using it when you know that you have initiative. That's all it really takes. Know that you have initiative, reposition. It's so good. You are going to... That's probably the thing. They play from behind. Even with the current layout the way it is, they tend to play from behind because you don't really do a lot turn 1. You try to set up your go turn to be turn 2. and then you look to hammer the most important units that your opponent has in that turn, and that's it. Vet Guard are a struggle. You need to know how to play. Orcs and Vet Guard are extremely strong, but you need to know how to play them. Like the Commandos and Vet Guard, they're super strong. But if you don't know how to play them, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like any Games Workshop game. When you go to like the Reddit and see what the meta list is, the amount of people who go to Reddit, find the meta list, and then buy the units to then build the meta list, but don't actually like watch how to play the meta list or how to have like certain ways of thinking when playing that into like different types of terrain or against different enemies. Like, you just have a meta list, congratulations. You're not gonna have fun when your opponent like does basic stuff and defeats you and you're like, oh, why didn't this work? But yeah, Vet Guard and Commandos, extremely powerful. Like, I would consistently point to intercessors, because you can play intercessors however you want. They do have issues scoring, absolutely, but you're going to find that you're not going to lose units that quickly, and you're going to be happy about that. Eventually what's going to happen is you're going to start realizing, like, oh, if I do this turn, I'll be able to get points, I'll be able to get ahead. I'll force my opponent to have to do certain things that he's not going to want to do, and you kind of, like, build up that moment in your mind of, like, okay, this is it. And then when you're like, I kind of want to try a Horde team, and you pick up a Horde team, you're going to be conceptually positioned perfectly to be like, oh, this is why I do this at this turn. This is the best moment for this to happen. Oh, I should expend this unit. He's not useful other than causing my enemy to run up to me and try to do something. Okay, because you'll get it a little bit more, I think, after experiencing the end of it with the super elite that is intercessors, kind of like allowing you to see turn 4 for what it is. Like, even if you don't win, you'll probably keep the game close, and I feel like almost like a seed in your head, you'll have that moment of like, oh man, if I had 2 extra units, this would have been a much easier game. And that's when you start playing the Horde army and you're like, oh, I get it. I know exactly what I should be doing here. Because now you have the resources. Now you have more AP than an elite team, and you can play with it. You can see what you need to do. Alright, let's, now that silver's dry. A little bit of this watered down Asserman. I might actually OSL with the airbrush on this. Yeah, you get the blue down. Switch over to Luxion. Similarly water it down. And do another ring. fricasseed metal. Let me get the camera prepped for fricasseed metal. Pew pew. Like, I want to OSL this. It's going to be me literally doing, like 2 hits of color from my airbrush. It's so weird to think, like, I need to turn my airbrush on for this 1 second of me making this thing look decent. But maybe I should. What do you think, chat? Should we OSL this plasma gun? Get this stuff put away. I need to move this because I don't want to get paint on this new pad that I got. Because this looks really good in the camera, this pad that I have here. And the other one looks horrible because it's covered in paint. I think we do it. Because I feel like we're working on, like, not cheesing out, right? So, let me pull this pad out. Leave this guy. Push this pad aside. Here we go. Where's my pink? That's magenta. Here's pink. I think we magenta. Because what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to hit this with ink afterwards on the coils to make it pink. That way the light is magenta and then the brightest part is still pink. Where are the parts for my airbrush? There it is. So I have to disassemble some stuff with my airbrush every time I take it apart to clean, do a basic cleaning too. Because I realize that the gasket kind of seals if you don't use it enough. It'll start to seal to the needle, which is obnoxious. So we gotta do a couple things here. I gotta cork the actual airbrush tank. I might have to mute the microphones because we found out with the lapel mics that it was fine because the lapel mics are very close range noise. I don't know if this is going to be horribly loud for you guys. Get the cleaner. So my goal when I usually get this prepped back up is I try to clean the needle. Since the Iwata cleaner that I use has lubricant in it. That's one of the things that I learned watching the videos that I did is that Iwata cleaner has lubricant in it. You'll probably want actual lubricant eventually for this thing, just because you're gonna want it. Like you're gonna need it. But keeping the Iwata lubricant like decent on this airbrush is very helpful. But like this is very rough right now. Right? So what I do is I put a little cleaner in here. I let it go back. And I do that. See? Now it works. Because before, I'd pull this back and then I'd let go and it would just like free float like this. Now, it actually goes back and forth. Gotta get that action. Clear that. Clear that. Alright, I'm going to turn my airbrush on. If it's super loud, let me know, because I'll have to make some adjustments. I can easily just mute the mic every time I turn it on. But we'll see. Here we go. Clear the cleaner out. There we go. Now, what we use is Liquitex White. Liquitex White is fantastic. It's basically already pre-thinned. It is exactly the consistency you want in an airbrush. I don't need a lot, is the trick here. I'm just going to do a couple drops. That. So you don't want to do too much. And now it's white. Go. You always want to baseline it like this. If you try to just put paint over top of something and that paint isn't fully opaque, it's not going to look good. Need a little magenta. Not a lot. There we go. Simple enough. Clean the paint out. compressor off. There's going to be a bit of a loud noise. Depressurized. Open the tank. Let any built up moisture out. And quickly disassemble the needle portion of the airbrush. Clean the needle. Boom. Done. Bring this back over here. So now the trick is we're going to need a small pin wash brush. Here we are. Very small, very thin tip. We're going to use the ink again because a lot of all of like painting is basically people being like, how the hell do I get capillary paint to work? It's a little easier than people would expect. Personally, I use the same Liquitex white ink I use to airbrush because it is a very fluid system. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of water to it to allow it to capillary a little bit better. But the point for how I do it is with the pin wash brush. You load up that tip, and then you kind of just like find the spots you want to be a little bit brighter in white. And you can kind of just like touch it. It makes it look really nice. Yeah, I mean, you can do that. So if you're just trying to make it look Slaanesh, probably the best thing to do is what Can You Roll a Crit did. Look into Necromunda. There's a team, I believe, called Goliath. It's sort of like a drugged up, like female monster-y looking people. Like they're like hulking female characters. There's like a really big one that you can use as the team's God, what the hell is it called? Oghren? There we are. There's the word. We found it. You can use it as the team's Oghren. The rest of the team can just be from that line. It might be a little expensive to pull off. But they basically all look like punk rockers. Alternatively, you'll have to figure something out. You have to like look around. To see like what models work. If you're planning on playing in tournaments, like actually look around for Games Workshop models. If you're not planning on playing in tournaments, The main thing you need to look at is what size the base is. Outside of that, you're fine. Just, go to Etsy, see if you find a model type that you're like, oh yeah, this is 100% Slaanesh. I want this. Like, I love Necromunda for some models. My buddy bought the new one that has like the Malstrain. He only bought it because he wanted the other team that was involved, so I bought the Malstrain off of him. So now I have a bunch of really cool looking Gene Stealers for my Gene Stealer cult army. I gotta figure out what the base sizes are in that box because the Patriarch needs a 50, so one of those models is gonna need to be on a 50. The others can be on 32 because it looks like they give you 6 models, which means I'm gonna need another box so that I could have a 10 total squad of Malstrain, and then I could have one Malstrain guy that looks like the Patriarch on a much larger base. Wet palette for what comes next. I'm gonna need to water down the fluorescent pink. For that though, there is a flat surface I need to turn white, which means I actually do need the Pro Acryl white. Pro Acryl white is insanely good. It is a fantastic single layer white paint that you usually single layer. Doesn't always end up working, but sometimes. Try to got some on my finger, then I got it down here. Let me clear some of it off. But yeah, definitely keep an eye on Necromunda for possible kill team conversions. Man, some of those models look so good. Actually, this weekend I'm getting my hands on the Malstrain. We might stream Thursday. It'll probably be mostly busy work unless these guys are still, in the process. But Friday I should be at my friend's house, and that's when I'll grab the Malstrain for next week. It's good to have. It's one of those really good tools to have in your back pocket, Badger. Like, I bought So Flat White to see if it was the same. It's not. So Flat White still needs like a couple hits. Most brands are weird like that, right? Like, you think, oh, this will work, and then it just doesn't. But, man, dude, Pro Acryl White, so solid. Pro Acryl is a great line of paints. It's pretty expensive, though. But I would highly suggest at least grabbing their white. My buddy has a bunch of their colors though. He went through and picked a bunch of colors out. Like he had a plum, which was really cool. He had a lot of just great pro acryl color. That looks fantastic. Well, how are you rattle can priming? Because I love Badger, the Stynylrez. Badger's the company name, which is going to be confusing considering your name. But Stynylrez. Stynylrez does a good one if you have an airbrush. You can also kind of brush it on, although I highly don't recommend that. I only brush it on when it's time to like fix stuff. Like if I really need to fix something on my model, I'll brush it on. But it is one of the best, and you can get it in really big containers for fairly cheap, and it lasts a very long time. Okay, yeah, so if you're stuck in the rattle world, that is wildly limited. You'll really have to look into it, because I'm not too sure on what companies produce and how good they are. Because rattle can is like a whole realm of chemicals that are very specific to allow a rattle can to work. Like I'll occasionally brush on the Stynylrez primer for like bases if I want to prime a base, because the texture paste that I use prefers prime surfaces to cling to. With the pink still kind of wet, I do want to make the middle part feel a little bit brighter. White kind of brightens it up. So, I mean, you can get a color you think you want to apply as a slap chop if you're really looking to do contrast. Like if you get a really nice white and a big brush, I gotta find mine. Ooh. So this is the one I have, but they sell even bigger makeup brushes. This is a Filbert, and you get some paint on it, you kind of dull it down on your palette, and then you just top bottom, you just single direction, kind of flow the brush over top of it to try to get that zenithal look. But they make makeup brushes that are like massive. You can do the same thing with. But yeah, if you're stuck in the rattle can realm, I don't know how to get a cheaper one that works. That's why I use airbrush paint though, because like I think this was $20. This was like $20 or $30. This is all white. I'm down to here on it with, and I've done like 10 teams and most of an army after I bought this, and I'm only a little over halfway done. And I also have black and gray from them, which I should probably buy the larger bottles for, but I didn't. But yeah, check it out. New. Yeah, the Badger airbrush. I don't know why. I don't know why it would clog. It's the thing is, it is chemical. Like, it will happen with some people, but like I've been able to with the Stynylrez primer and this airbrush, which is a $20 creative brand airbrush, which means that this is an airbrush that is designed, mass produced at a Korean or Chinese or Japanese or some cheaper creation company, like production company, that then has the logo stamped to it, and then all the companies that make a cheap airbrush, this is the airbrush. It's the exact same airbrush. I bought that for $20, and I'm completely fine. It might just be a mixture thing for you. It might just be like a mix. You might need to put more thinner in just to do it. Because it's also, the way I've always talked about airbrushing, it's kind of like baking. Baking is different depending on where you live, because the air pressure, the heat, just anything, it adjusts how you're supposed to bake, because it'll change kind of how dough rises. It'll change the temperatures needed. It very much is a system of I need a smaller brush for this. I have to figure out exactly for me what works. And it's something, it took me a while to figure out, because if you go around on YouTube, you'll find all the people who are like, oh, this is exactly the mix you need for your airbrush to make it work. And then everyone does it, and some people it works, some people it doesn't. And they're like, this is weird. Why doesn't this work for me? Blah, 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 blah. It's because there is no one-stop shop for that stuff. There's not. You need to test and experiment and figure out exactly what works for where you live. Like, for instance, me, during the summer, I don't gotta do anything. There's enough thinner in the Stynylrez primer that I can just use it, and it's fine. There's sometimes, like, Stynylrez comes pre-thinned, and if you shake it up enough, the thinner should already be good enough. But once it's winter here, whenever it's winter in this area, I have to put a little more flow improver into the mix, because the air pressure changes, and it's enough of an air pressure change that I kind of need to figure out what to do, like how to adjust it so it doesn't clog as much. Oh no, music's over. Oh god, there's not a lot of funky songs. Who would have guessed? Let's go with chill. Is there even a lens on this? I don't think there is. Oh, I think it moves this way, maybe? We're doing it this way. Hang on. My buddy glued it together wrong. Haha! I knew something was off. Well, he sort of glued it together wrong. This is the lens, but this is supposed to be upside down. So the lens is supposed to be up here. Poggers. Thanks for the follow. I need to check my bases to make sure I've got a 50. Because I could technically pre-do all the bases for the Malstrain Gene Stealers. Because I'll need 5 32s. And then 150. Okay. This is the part where we kind of go a little all out. I'm going to need my pearlescent ink. And a bit of yellow-orange fluorescent. We're going to make a color. We're also going to use the Pro Acryl White. The reason we're doing yellow-orange is because when we're mixing it with white, it should pull it closer to the yellow. More pearlescent in here. Still a bit orange, but I think that's fine. And get some chartreuse going. Probably should have went straight chartreuse at the beginning. We might make an adjustment then. let's see. So there's a little hint of pearlescent in here. So it already has like a little bit of shimmer, and then the paint itself is fluorescent. So it will be blacklight reactive. like how bright this yellow is. It's a lot brighter than I expected. So it depends on what your approach is. I usually just go with like a flat fluorescent and call it a day. But there's like a lot of cool approaches you can take to lens work. You can either do the sort of like the build-up system that people tend to do, where they put down like a decently mid-saturation color, and then they go back in with like a really fine brush and put down kind of the reflective element of that lens, and you can build it up that way. It's kind of like how the Aldari gemstones work when people do those. Alternatively, might I suggest there is a paint called Ardcoat. Ardcoat is just a gloss. That's all it is. Ardcoat is just gloss. So what you can do with the Ardcoat is you can kind of paint the under part of the lens the color you want it to be. Like if you want it to be like a bright color, or like a dark color, you can do that. That's fine. And then you take a brush you don't really care that much about, and then you put some Ardcoat on that, and then put it over top of the lens. That way, the lens is the standard color, and then the room lighting actually triggers the gloss effect. Alternatively, well, sort of the same though. I can kind of show you this. So one of the methods I use for lens painting, when I want to just do like a lens, my Lazy Man lens system involves the Ardcoat's thing, but there's 3 of the gemstones, which you probably know about. Soulstone, Warpstone, and Waystone. I think Soulstone, Waystone, and I think it's Warpstone, right? It's the Aldari gemstones. Those are pre-pigmented Ardcoat colors. It's just Ardcoat with pigment already in it. So you don't need the Ardcoat if you're happy with the colors that those are. And what you can do is you paint the lens silver, like a really nice bright silver, and then you work really hard at putting that pre-colored Ardcoat, or you can pigment your own Ardcoat and put it over top of that silver. That way, when light hits it, it passes through, goes to the silver, and comes back out. So it brightens those lenses, and also, again, room lighting matters. So it actually makes it like a physically reflective lighting system. Those are some options. Or you can, of course, manually do it, where you have to paint. You get like 3 colors or 2 colors to choose from. Specifically, the lens color and then the highlight color you want based on the lens. Just go from there. If you have a bunch of contrasts, I'd say just get Ardcoat, because you can just mix the contrasts into the Ardcoat and make whatever hell color you want. You want them to be purple, you know, chuck some Luxion in there. You want to be blue, you got some Acerman, or maybe you want a lighter blue, you can go into like the more frosty colors. You can kind of make your own. The only reason I tend to use the gemstoning paints is because I'm lazy and I don't care about mixing. Like, if you've watched me long enough when I paint, you'll notice that I don't mix colors a lot. That's just because I'm lazy and I want consistency across multiple characters. Because if you're going to mix, you're going to mix a lot. You need to know that you're, like, if you have a lot to paint, you're going to be like, wow, I got to mix a ton of this. Or it's going to look weird when I get to, like, the 40th unit and I have to remix and it's not right. I hate that. I'd rather just use, like, straight ups. Speed paint's good. I like speed paint. I use a lot of it. We used a cultist cloak specifically for the leather for these guys because it's a slightly blue-black. It's like the most subtle blue ever, and I love it for that. That's like my favorite thing when you do black, like anything in miniature painting, to make it slightly blue or slightly like purple or something is so good. Unless you're an Aldari Ranger, then you make it slightly green. Slightly green black is ridiculous. Put these bristles through a wash here in a second. Where the hell did my pink cleaner go? They're starting to fray a little bit. I think I found the other squeeze bottle. We're gonna need this. Where the hell did my cleaning bottle go? Ah, found it. Pink stuff. I don't know. I have stuff to play Warcry. I have yet to test game Warcry though. I know you have to build teams, which is why a lot of people are pulled to it over Kill Team. But the problems, again, when you have to construct a full team, there's problems with balance. And people have kind of noticed that with Warcry. And then, like, the way to play it seems to be, like, something where people really enjoy for rules. But I haven't, like, played, so I can't say for sure one way or another on, like, the nuance of it. It is an AOS game, like, it's from the AOS genre, and so far, the new launch of AOS has been great when it comes to rules simplicity, while being complicated at the same time, which I love. It's just like Underworlds in that regard. So if Warcry is like poorly written, that'd be a little confusing, because I feel like the AOS team does better with rules writing. But again, that's from the perspective of someone who has to run a test game of Warcry to see how it feels. Because I still haven't. I just keep hearing a bunch of channels saying that they love the Warcry system, while other channels are going, Warcry kind of sucks because it's super imbalanced. Certain teams can't even, like, compete. I don't know what to believe. I'm getting mixed messages. Well, that's probably because not a lot of people play it. I mean, this is YouTube, and if they ever, like, uploaded one and noticed that no one was watching it, even, like, their big fans, like, if the people who follow them don't click that video, then YouTube is just like, uh-oh. Are you losing viewership? And it's, like, horrifying. As a person over here, it's just like, oh god, no. Okay. It is 2:22. We are kicking ass. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to go get my chrome paint. We're going to paint every single one of these bases chrome. Specifically the tops of the bases. Be right back. Vallejo Airbrush Chrome. Completely fine to be brushed on. Now again, this is mostly an idea for how to undercoat sort of a clear resin liquid in an interesting way. While we apply this, we kind of have to debate what we're going to do with that resin. I know I'm going to be putting pearlescent in it, probably a lot of pearlescent. The question is, do we want to try to tone it? Do we want to like put like a light blue or something in it? This chrome is merely to make it so that when the light hits it, it reflects back through whatever's in that resinous liquid. Yep, later, Robbie. Trying to think of how we're going to do this. I've got thin white masking tape. We can try that. I know most people point to like packing tape, or usually a kind of tape where it's like clear plastic. Ooh. Make sure I don't have any paint on my hand when I pick it up. Don't need to chrome any other elements on this. might be able to get away. I don't want to risk it though. I think I do try to tape it off. I have gotten away with applying the resin color and then just like letting it sit. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to work here. Chrome. Get some beverage. Grab the tape I think I want to use. So the way this is gonna kind of work is you do need to sort of make it settle. I don't know. I don't know if this is gonna work as a tape. I hate how just generally thick this is. Is the other one thinner? I think it is. And I dropped it. No. Move my water bottle. No, not his last gun. What, did they not send you one, or? I'm not gonna lie, I might try to just... I might try to just physically do it. And pray that it holds. Or... Okay, so I have two things. I have the resin one, which is usually the one where I'm like, yeah, that'll do it. Yeah, because I don't like this. there was a lot of changes back then, man. Well, okay, so Las Guns. Yeah, I don't think there were power packs back then, and even then, the Kasrkin. The reason their power packs have what they have is because it's like heat, right? Like it's the superheated system. Okay, so what we need here, we have coarse pumice. That's not what we want. We have more coarse pumice. Still not what we want. Clear tar gel. Clear tar gel is actually what we want to use. I think this is crackle paste over here, which means I think, yeah, that's crackle paste. I think I got rid of the other stuff that I was using. Which kinda sucks. We might be able to pull this off though. Maybe. I gotta be very careful with it. So, clear tar gel. It's resinous. The way I do it. Potentially. Okay. I should probably go get a paper towel. Good bit of resinous liquid in there. Now we kind of concoct what we're gonna do. I think it definitely should involve a good bit of the pearlescent ink we've been using. Like a lot more than I've been using so far, because if you don't do a good bit, it's not going to resemble anything. You're barely going to see the pearlescent function. Okay. I think that might be enough because it's about right there. Next on the docket. I kind of want to pick a color to make it. I think it should be like a middling blue. gonna do this one. I actually kind of like this. Caribbean Blue. Now we grab a mixing ball. Drop it in. I'm going to cork it. Cork it, close it, and to save my wrist, vibro mix it, because it's going to take a minute. The resinous fluid doesn't normally like other things getting applied inside of it. You have to actually seriously mix it up. The mixing ball actually helps for this, because the mixing ball provides a small agitator inside the actual paint itself. And slowly pulling it, you can kind of see. You can kind of see how the swirls are working out. We still need a little more. I bought a laboratory. It's just a laboratory vortex mixer. That's all, and it was super cheap on Amazon. It's meant for like beaker mixing, but is perfectly sized for these little eyedropper paint things. However, I have noticed that if I have to hold this thing down for a while, it basically like pushes all the blood out of my arm. So my grip gets like weird. It's getting there. But yeah, it's Int Lab. INTLLAB. It's their vortex mixer. And screw, it does look like it pulled a lot out of the top. Squeezy cork. Ooh, looks good. And you can see the pearlescent in it. That's actually really good. It might be a little too liquidy though. We're gonna have to be very careful with this. What's up, Sprue? Yeah, 1 second. Let me check something. Being extra careful because I know this stuff flows really well based on like the angle. So if I tilt the base too far, it is going to go everywhere. I'm kind of using surface tension to try to hold it to the top. Nice. Looncourt's great. Hopefully you have fun with them. Anything grot related just feels fun. And then you get like squig on top of it. And it's just like, yeah, this is the best. Name a more perfect duo than Squig and Grot. I'm gonna leave some of these bubbles in here, because if it dries and the bubbles actually persist, I'll be happy. more to that one. It's like it's all getting sucked into the under part of the little robot. Yep, it's Underworlds. It used to be AOS and Underworlds, but they all got kind of moved to Legends, which means you really can't use them in tournament play. But the models are really good, is the thing. Like, they're really cool models. So even if you can't use the squad in Underworlds, you might be able to use the models themselves in, like, different situations. Because, like, I have Ephilum's, the Ephilum's Pandemonium. And, like, I could use the demon models as, like, markers. And then the leader of Ephilum's is, I believe, the right size base to work with, to work as a on-foot Gaunt Summoner. I'm pretty sure it's the right size. So if I ever think with my Disciples of Tzeentch army that I want an on-foot Gaunt Summoner, I got one. I'm really glad we overloaded this. Hopefully I have a little bit left for correctionary after this dries. Kind of happy that because I was playing Thousand Suns, that it sort of made me pick Disciples of Tzeentch for AOS. Because honestly, looking at kind of how the teams are and like their visual aesthetics and stuff, it would have been very hard for me to pick one. Like, I would have probably gone Skaven just because this is the launch that comes with like, hey, more Skaven, fun stuff. Complete redo of basically the whole army. Tons of new models. Enjoy. But, like, the reality is I would have been torn for the most part at Gloomspite Gitz or Skaven. Gloomspite, because they just look hilarious and awesome all at once. But than Skaven, because, God, those new models, man. I don't know if you've seen them in person. Ooh, they look so good. I could do some wild things painting those. Alright. There's still a good bit of the resin left. So we have to kind of cross our fingers and hope that when this dries, I don't have to correct too much. It is going to take like a day for this stuff to dry properly. It is. I'm going to try to pick one up to show you guys. A little difficult though. Don't want to move them around too much. Because again, we're using surface tension. I just like the idea that they're like on an alien world and the surface is just like gooey. This is the thing about 40K that I wish people like explored more. Is that prospect of not every world needs to be a ball of mud. Right? Not every place your army's gonna end up is gonna be just like oh yeah, it's yet another jungle world. Sometimes you're gonna go places. Maybe these guys are kind of trapped in the warp, right? They're just trying to find a way back home. Maybe they're on a Gothic ship, and something in the fuel system shattered, and now they're trying to get to it to seal it. And the fuel caused a bunch of demons to appear. Kill team battle, activate. Doesn't always have to just be dirt or gray rubble or even catwalks. Sometimes it can be bright blue, resinous, pearlescent, watery thing. So yeah, we gotta let it dry before we before we get the actual rings painted. Because I don't want to move these till it's dry. And we'll see when it dries if the silver that's underneath gets to play coming through. Because this resinous fluid is a little weird. At times, it'll dry and it'll kind of like create ripples in it, and you'll see what's underneath it coming through, which I think that's where the silver will be like kind of cool. And then you apply the black over top of it. Yeah, it's so shiny. Let me throw some stuff away. As we wind down here. Vroom, vroom. So gooey. Like, you could drip this stuff off of like NIDS. You could. This is one of the things I would do if I played NIDS. There's a lot of like recesses and open areas on NIDS because they have that feeling of exoskeleton versus like inner organs and stuff like that. In the areas where there's like splits for the exoskeleton, I would have made a giant jar of this. Like, I just all over the place. I'd be like, all right, there's goo coming out of them. Just right here, goo. The freaking neuro ones that have the giant brains, you know I would cover that brain in this crap. I would cover it in it. Pull this light down. Yep, it's 3 o'clock. I was planning on going a little later today, but once we get the resinous stuff down, we can't touch it. Like, if I tilt these 45 degrees, it's all coming off. And I'd rather it just stay. We're going to have to paint black rings on them a little later. If we stream Thursday, it's mostly going to be finishing these guys up. At which point I have neophytes to build. We can just build neophytes and hang out and talk. Maybe there'll be news by then. Who knows? But I should probably start organizing here and cleaning up. I've got my big sound dampening pictures I got to put up on the wall. Those will be good. But yeah. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for talking. Thanks for chilling. Hopefully you got some cool hobby stuff happening. Hopefully you got some fun projects coming up. Yeah, until next time, guys.